purify my silver. I purify my own. And in all of my years of refining silver, I never allow the temperature to get so hot that my silver is ruined. You see, the Father told his Son, your heavenly Father is a refiner of silver, the great metallurgist, and he purifies his own as well. And because of his standard of holiness, he constantly refines his silver to remove any dross. Be it known to you, the Father explained, that there are several ways the heart can be tainted with dross. All dross is not sin, but all dross is an impurity. The sin magnets of this life are impurities, and if they are not removed, they will draw your heart away from the great metallurgist and into sin. As the Father continued to remove the smelly dross, he explained, the great metallurgist has called us not just from sin, but from the sin magnets which draws us too close to the edge. Let us never forget, we can entertain thoughts, ideas, and attitudes that become sin magnets. These vain concepts work subliminally and lay a foundation of rebellion and misery in our lives. The Father looked at his Son with gentleness and lovingly spoke correction by saying, before you left home, there were several sin magnets that were drawing you into the world, causing you to lose your identity. You were disinterested in my ways. They no longer held meaning. You became dissatisfied with the protection of my laws, and you no longer gave them honor. This led you to disillusionment because the life I taught you no longer met your expectations. You erected barriers between us and became disconnected from me. Those magnets had to lead to disappointments that caused you to leave home and suffer many unfulfilled expectations. So, being disinterested, dissatisfied, disillusioned, disconnected, and disappointed, you were drawn into becoming dispassionate, which led to feelings of discouragement. All sin magnets that drew you away from my laws and away from my ways. But I tell you today that in all of your pain, all of your suffering and disappointments, the great metallurgist will not allow the fire of testing to destroy you. You are like silver to me, and you are also like silver to him. The Son felt uplifted, but had one more question for his Father. When, the Son asked, does this process of refining and purification come to an end? Knowing his Son wanted to circumvent the wages of his sins, the Father looked at him and smiled and said, as the temperature rises, the dross on silver will surface. The refiner, a metallurgist, will remove the dross from the silver and discard it. That process is repeated multiple times until the refiner can look into the metal, into the melted silver, and see his reflection. You can rest assured when he sees his reflection that for a season your test will be over. But during your time of testing, the temperature will never be too high to prolong the process or too high to necessitate repeating the same process. The great metallurgist knows exactly how to control the temperature. We must learn to trust him. With that said, the father then guided his son over to a pile of dross and continued to explain. This dross you see can be likened to the vices of this world. Its presence over silver diminishes its intrinsic value, dulls its brightness, and weakens its strength. Dross, like sin and sin magnets, causes a horrible smell to ascend up to the great metallurgist. The old unregenerate self is weak. Being weak, the old nature does not want to suffer and is always at enmity with spiritual truths. When we truly understand our propensity for serving sin and understand the purpose for the Lord refining our heart with fire, I think we will learn to trust him more during our refining seasons. The father turned to his son and gently touched him on his shoulder, and he said, "Son, there are no shortcuts, and your strength comes from your submission to the great metallurgist. That means that you will have to confess, I can't do this by myself. I can't walk this journey. I can't live this life on earth by myself." And that's going to happen before you can admit that the Father can. Otherwise, you will continue to believe that there is still some ability within you, some strength lying within you that will enable you to get through this life by yourself without the refining process. That attitude will not bring you the desire, the success that you desire, not apart from the great metallurgist. Before the son left his father that day, his father cautioned him and said, "Remember, if you choose a life independent from God, there's little difference between the way you live your life and the way non-believers live their life. Honor the great metallurgist, especially during the refining season." And why? Because it's easy to believe that it is not God because it is painful. But we can't allow a painful situation to have us just assume that because it is painful, it is not God. Well, I hope you have enjoyed the parable of the great metallurgist. And in conclusion of our teaching today, there are 7 thought-provoking questions that you may want to ponder. Number 1, if the great metallurgist did not purify your heart with fire, the fire of testing, how long do you think you would travel the wide road of destruction, and who do you think you would become? If you were allowed to purify your own life your own way, where would you start? What would you hide? What would you ignore? Before answering the question, remember we have a natural inclination for serving sin, as well as being self-righteous in a sinful state. Number 3, if you had to do the job of the great metallurgist on your own, how high would you allow the temperature to rise so that the impurities would surface and to be removed? Would the temperature be high enough to finish the process, or lukewarm, which would prolong the process? Number 4, if dross is ugly and smelly to humans, how does a tainted heart look and smell to God? Number 5, the refining process can be long, painful, and discouraging, But do you believe the Lord to be a refiner of silver or a destructive arsonist? Number 6. It is a fact that we will never change what we believe until our belief system cannot produce the results we need or want. What belief system do you have that is not producing the desired results that the refiner wants to remove from your life and discard? And finally, number 7. From the parable of the metallurgist, what have you learned about the love of God? What have you learned about the protection of God? And what have you learned about the grace of God? I truly hope that the parable of the metallurgist has been a blessing in your life today. If this message has been a blessing to you, you desire to support this ministry, please, the information will be on the screen. God bless you richly, and may God keep you safe.
He's more than wonderful. That's what Jesus is to me. He's everything that my soul ever longed for, everything my God promised, and so much more than amazing, more than marvelous, more miraculous could ever be. He's more than wonderful, more than wonderful. That's what Jesus is to me. He's more than wonderful. That's what Jesus is to me. He's everything that my soul ever longed for, everything my God promised, and so much more than amazing, more than marvelous, more miraculous could ever be. He's more than wonderful, more than wonderful. That's what Jesus is to me.